Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. It's nice to see you. Everyone who I could see their faces. And I hope that you're having a nice week so far. Happy Tuesday. And today is the 39th day of the Omer, which means that Shavuos is just 11 days away. We're going to be receiving the Torah. And it's a very exciting time being in these days of the Omer and preparing for the receiving of the Torah. We have some very exciting things planned over here at the synagogue for Shavuos. Saturday night, we have all night learning with scholars in residence, and we have a cereal bar and ice cream. Sundays on Sunday, bring your whole family to hear the 10 Commandments, and that is coming up. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Bechukotai. And normally, this week's Torah portion is a double Torah portion along Behar Bechukotai. But because we're in a leap year, the Torah portions are separate to kind of make up for the extra weeks. There's 53 weeks Torah portions in the Torah. 53, by the way, is the numerical value of the word Gan. Gan, Gimel Nun, is 53. There's 53 Torah portions, and Gan also means a garden. Of course, the Torah is our garden of life. It's the blueprints to the world. It's the most important thing that we have is the Torah. And we read Bechukotai, and we're actually going to be finishing the book of Leviticus, the entire book of Vayikra. We will finish and conclude this week, and we end off, and the whole synagogue will recite together Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. And of course, it is every time a Shabbat Chazak. It's a very special time. It's a good time to come to synagogue and hear the conclusion of the third book being read. Now, Bechukotai is a bittersweet Torah portion at first glance. And the reason is because Parshat Bechukotai has what's known as the famous Tochacha. The Tochacha are the curses inside of the Torah. There are two Torah portions where we read the curses of what will happen to the Jewish people if we don't listen to the Torah and the Mitzvot. And the 2 weeks that we read about the Tochacha, the curses, are this week, Bechukotai, which is right before the holiday of Shavuot, as well as Parshat Kitavo, which is before the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. And there's various customs actually when reading the Torah portion. The one reading the Torah, we don't call someone up. Every time you call somebody to the Torah, it's a great honor, and there's a lot of significance. We call people to the Torah before a yahrzeit. You get called up by a bar mitzvah, a special occasion, a birthday, whatever it is. Everyone, we call people to the Torah. It's a beautiful thing to do, but every aliyah, of course, is special. The Haftorah is very special. But the Tochacha is not a nice aliyah to call someone up, right, Pablo? I'll call you to the Torah for the Tochacha. You look around like, what did I do? You're calling me up to read all the curses. So actually, we don't call anybody up for this aliyah of the Torah. Rather, the Baal Korah, the one reading the Torah, silently accepts the aliyah. He makes the blessings and just reads it. Without calling someone for this, for the reading of the curses. And you'll notice in the synagogue that the Tochacha, the curses, are read quickly and quietly. That is the custom, that we read it quickly and quietly. The curses are not such a beautiful, nice thing at first glance. Today we're going to actually discuss how perhaps it is a nice thing, the curses. Maybe the curses has a little bit of a deeper meaning behind. That's what we're going to discuss a little bit later. But at first glance, of course, it's not. They're curses. They're heavy-duty things that the Torah writes. If we don't follow God, that's going to happen. By the way, just to announce the Torah portion of Bechukotai, if you're following along in the Chumash and want to read along and read the curses and the blessings that we're about to get to, it's on page 708 in the blue art scroll Chumash. But before we get to the curses and the Tochacha, which is the main part of the Torah portion, I'd like to first speak about the name of the Torah portion. Of course, the word Bechukotai is loosely translated as my decrees. You follow my decrees, the decrees that I command, and we speak about the mitzvot that are going to, if we follow the mitzvot and guard the mitzvot and do them, then at first, the first 13 verses of the Torah, it actually tells us the blessings, the physical blessings that are going to happen to us, like receiving rain in the proper time and having many different blessings and good things. And I want to just say that the word Bechukotai also comes from the word chukim. There's 3 categories of mitzvot. Category number 1 would be mishpatim, would be laws that are very obvious, right? Like don't kill, don't steal. If it says if I didn't have the Torah, I would know that I shouldn't steal. I would learn from an ant. Apparently ants don't steal. And I would learn modesty from a cat. Cats are very modest. The mishpatim are laws that are seemingly obvious, right? You don't kill somebody. It's basic understanding that you don't kill somebody, you don't steal from someone. But those are mishpatim. Then there's laws that are called edut, which are testimonials. God says, I did something. Here's a good reason to start doing this mitzvah. For example, I took you out of Egypt. I want you to remember that. So Passover. Or I rested on the 7th day of creation, keep Shabbat. There are mitzvot with reasons. Then the third one is chukim, which is like the name of the Torah portion, Bechukotai, the decrees that Hashem gives us. And these are laws that are statutes where God says, do it because I said so. For example, the laws of kosher, believe it or not, fall into this category. Even though many people come up with all sorts of reasons for kosher, whether it's people think it's maybe for health reasons, which some things will suggest that if you keep kosher, that will be good for your health. But on the other hand, look around. You don't necessarily, it doesn't go hand in hand that if you look at someone who's Jewish or Torah observant, that, oh yeah, he must be super healthy. He keeps kosher. That's why he's so fit. It's not necessarily hand in hand because that's not necessarily the reason. The reason is because God told us to keep kosher. Or for example, the red heifer, the para aduma. And there's no reason for that. Hashem says, bring the red heifer. Or shotness, not having mixed wool and linen in our garments, is another example. So that's the third category of mitzvot. But when it comes to fulfilling them, we need to fulfill every mitzvah for one reason and one reason only. And that is because Hashem told us. So even though, sometimes it's a lot of people, I'll meet people and they'll tell me, this mitzvah I get, this commandment I could do, I like that one, this one's good, but the other ones, maybe a little bit difficult for me. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. Well, guess what? Every mitzvah that we do because Hashem commanded it to us. Now, Hashem was nice, and he said, I'm going to give you some reasons. Some commandments, I'll give you some reasons why you should keep. But not every mitzvah has reasons, and we keep them because God commanded us to keep the mitzvot. And it's very important to remember that every mitzvah is like a relationship between us and Hashem, right? Just like in a relationship with a person. Sometimes you might not understand what or why your spouse likes something, right? Imagine a husband comes home, his wife says, buy me flowers for Shabbos. And he says, flowers for Shabbos? I'm going to buy you flowers. They're going to die. Why do you want flowers? They're going to die within 5 days, 7 if you're lucky. Imagine the husband, he brings flowers. He sees that they die. And he's like, you know what? You want a gift? I'll get you a gift. I'm going to get you a good gift. I'm going to go to Home Depot and I'm going to buy you a new drill. That's a good gift. He's going to come home. His wife's not going to be so happy. Why? Because, of course, that's not what she wants. And just like in a relationship with people, of course, the same with the relationship of Hashem. Hashem says, I created this world. Here's the blueprint. And this is how I connect with you. And this is how we build a relationship. So make sure to do the mitzvot. And Bechukotai comes from this word of the, similar to the Torah portion of chukat, which are all about statutes and laws that fall into this category. Another translation or connection to the shoresh, to the root of the word Bechukotai, is chakakti. Like it says chukachakakti, which means engravement. And it says that the Torah, the way that we need to keep the Torah is like it needs to be completely engraved, right? The 10 Commandments were coming up to Shavuot. The 10 Commandments, they were engraved in stone. Sometimes you could have ink written on a parchment or on a paper, but the ink is separate to the paper, right? If you haven't done this in a while, I would recommend if you take down your mezuzah. By the way, you're supposed to get your mezuzah checked at least once in 7 years. If you live in Florida, I recommend to do it at least once in 3 years, especially the outside mezuzah. But what happens? The ink actually becomes separated to the parchment. It invalidates the mezuzah. Okay, so this is a little advertisement. If you haven't checked your mezuzot in a while, it's very good to get them checked. Just to make sure that the ink is still there, that it's not scratched out, it's not rubbed out. Very important. It says that the mezuzah brings a lot of blessings to life. Whenever someone has challenges, they should check their mezuzot. So check your mezuzahs. But because they're ink and parchment, they become separated. It's two separate entities. Engravement, the Torah needs to be engraved inside of us because the engravement becomes part of the stone. And the same thing is true when it comes to our observance of Torah and the way that we live our life. It needs to be engraved inside of us. The Torah needs to be engraved in our day-to-day life. And this is a very important part and way that we need to serve Hashem, is to be completely one with it. Not two different entities, but completely one with all the lessons, all the messages and everything that the Torah tells us to do. And that's just a little bit about the name of the Torah portion. But once you start reading the Torah portion and you read the first part, it speaks about all the blessings of keeping the mitzvot and the rewards of what happens if you follow my laws. And the commentaries actually have a very interesting discussion over here. And they say, why is the Torah telling us about physical rewards? You would think that the Torah, how should the Torah reward us for following it? It should be more spiritual, right? Shouldn't the Torah be like a spiritual kind of reward? And there's different opinions actually brought down. The Maimonides says that the reason why it brings us a physical reward is that way it's not just a reward, but it's telling us you don't need to worry about physicality. Now you can focus on Torah study. Why? Because I gave you I gave you the blessings. You don't need to worry about the field. You don't need to worry about your farm. You don't need to worry about your animals. Everything's going to be good. And that's what it means. It's not a reward. It's just telling you practically keep Torah and you don't need to worry about the physical. Reminds me of a story. There was a father whose daughter got engaged to a kollel student, a young man who was studying Torah in yeshiva, and he was learning Torah, and he was very excited to meet his son-in-law, and he goes out to meet his future son-in-law, and he says, my dear son-in-law, you study Torah day and night. It's very inspiring, amazing, but let me ask you a question. How are you going to support your family? And the son-in-law tells his father-in-law, he says, dear father-in-law, don't worry, God will provide. And he says, okay, but how are you going to put food on your table? He said, father-in-law, don't worry, God will provide. And this wealthy father-in-law asked him, well, what are you going to do for a job? He says, job, God's going to provide. He says, and how are you going to pay education? He says, education, God will provide. And his father-in-law is looking at his son-in-law, and he wraps up the conversation. He goes home to his wife, and he says, so did you speak to her son-in-law who's studying Torah all day? What's he going to do? How was the conversation? He says, it was amazing. He says, what do you mean? He says, I want you to know that our future son-in-law is already calling me God. But at the end of the day, a person, of course, when you study Torah, Hashem provides. God does really provide. God makes sure that everything will happen. And that's the physical blessing. That's what the Maimonides says. Another opinion says that we can't understand spiritual rewards, so the Torah doesn't mention spiritual rewards. But there's another there's a few other opinions that says that the people, that the Jewish people used to worship idols, and they thought that the blessing came from idol worship. So God had to show them, no, if you keep the Torah, that's how physical blessings come. That's brought down by the Reb Sadia Gaon, another great commentary. And it's a big discussion, this question of why physical rewards. But the Rebbe, he brings down a beautiful idea, and he says that the physical and the spiritual actually needs to be one thing. And the Torah is telling us the physical rewards that a person is getting is actually part of his spiritual reward. It's part of his Torah observance. It's part of his life. Physicality and spirituality is one thing. Because the way a person needs to live his life is not just, when I'm in the synagogue, I'm Jewish, but when I'm, eating out with friends, not so much. Rather, 24/7 around the clock, a Jew needs to wake up a Jew, live it like a Jew, go to sleep like a Jew, eat like a Jew. Everything that we need to do, it needs to be integrated, because the Torah is our vitality. The Torah is our life. We can't separate ourselves from the Torah. The analogy is given. It was actually said by Rabbi Akiva, coming from Lag BaOmer, one of the people that we remember on Lag BaOmer is Rabbi Akiva and his students. But it was during the time that the Romans were killing many rabbis, and that's how they started. Of course, you read about it on Yom Kippur. The 13 martyrs that were killed in an awful and terrible way. Rabbi Akiva was one of them. But Romans put out many rules, and one of them, of course, was you're not allowed to study or teach Torah. And Rabbi Akiva ignored this rule. And one of his colleagues went to Rabbi Akiva and he said, how are you teaching Torah? Don't you know that they're going to kill you if they catch you? And Rabbi Akiva said, I want to tell you a story. There was once a fish, and the fish was swimming very quickly in the riverbank, and a fox sees that the fish is swimming very fast, running for its life, and the fox says to the fish, Mr. Fish, what's going on? And he says, there's a bunch of fishermen, they're trying to catch me, they're trying to scoop me up. I'm swimming as fast as I can to escape the net of the fishermen to live. And the fox tells the fish, I'll tell you what, jump out of the water. I will hold you, and I will protect you, and I will save you. And the fish says, fox, you're supposed to be the smart animal. Don't you know if I leave the water for one moment, I for sure won't live? As long as I'm swimming quickly, I have a chance of living. But if I leave the water, I won't be able to live. And the same thing is true with the Torah. The Torah is our life. And therefore, we need to constantly turn to and be engaged in and study and learn the Torah. Because for 1 second, he said, the Romans will kill me if they catch me. But if I stop teaching Torah and we don't teach Torah to our children, then for sure we're dead. And Torah needs to be completely one with us. And therefore Hashem says that you should be one with the Torah. And here's your physical rewards, because the physical rewards will remind you to constantly live your physical life also alongside the Torah. And therefore our physical and spiritual life need to be combined. And when we go to, a person has to have the mindset that why do I live? I live to serve God. Why do I work? To make money in order to serve God. Why do I eat? In order that I could be healthy and physically well in order to serve Hashem. Why do I do exercise? And once again, in order that my gesund, my health should be proper. Everything physical that we do needs to have its connection to and purpose for serving Hashem. Of course, we need to serve God. It's important to pray every day and to learn every day. But even a business person who sets, the Mishnah says that you should set Parak Echad Shachris, Parak Echad Arvis, that a person should set 1 hour or a little bit in the morning. They should learn 1 chapter in the morning and 1 chapter in the evening. And even if you're working the whole day, your mindset should be that I need to work in order to serve Hashem. I work in order to serve God. It's not the other way around. It's not, I'm working because I need to make money and I want to live a good life. And I also happen to serve God. It needs to be with the right mindset. And then, of course, it's okay to work the whole day. It's okay to do all of our physical things as long as we're doing it with the right purpose. Not only is it okay, but the physical becomes transformed into spiritual. The physicality becomes the greatest thing. And I'm not going to go get too into this, but really that's the whole purpose of the creation of this physical world. And our whole purpose of our life is in order to take the physical of this world, our mundane, regular day-to-day life, and use it to serve Hashem. That's what it's all about. And that's why the Torah says these are the physical rewards that a person is going to get. We then get to the consequence of failing to observe the mitzvot. And you read through the Tochacha, and of course, there's a lot on the Tochacha, on the curses, and then they're very sad, and you read them, it's very painful things that will happen to the Jewish people if we don't listen to Hashem's voice. But just to tell you a little bit about the Tochacha, and we're gonna try to understand how the Tochacha maybe is not the worst thing in the world, but really there's secret blessings behind it. But there's a story about the Kloisenberger Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda Halberstam. He was a incredible rabbi in person. He survived the Holocaust, but his 11 children and wife were killed in the Holocaust. He, after the Holocaust, went to Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and then eventually went to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel, and established the Laniado Hospital in Netanya. And by the way, the fundraiser for that hospital comes to our synagogue all the time. And it's an amazing thing. And a very interesting person, many stories, how he helped rebuild Yiddishkeit after the ashes of the Shoah and after his personal life. It says that he didn't even have time to say Kaddish and mourn the loss because he was so busy saving people physically and spiritually. But it says that whenever it came to the Tochacha, one Shabbat, and they were reading the curses, and like I mentioned in the beginning of the class, that the one reading the Torah reads it extra fast and extra quiet. That's the custom. You read it very quietly because they're the curses. And the Kloisenberger Rebbe was standing in shul, and he started screaming in Yiddish while the man was reading the Torah. He said, "Hecher, hecher," louder, louder. He was screaming at the one reading the Torah to read it louder. And at first, the Baal Korah, he thought he misheard him. He didn't listen to him. And again, he continued, louder, hecher, louder, 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 telling him to keep raising his voice and to read it slower. And they asked, of course, the Kloisenberger Rebbe afterwards. They said, what in the world is going on over here? What are you doing? And he said that I want Hashem to hear the curses because this is something that we already went through. We already went through the curses. All the curses that God says in the Torah we went through, and now it's time for Mashiach. Now it's time for the exile because everything already happened to us. All the bad things already happened. It's time for the blessings. It's time for the only good. And he said, therefore, I want Hashem to hear it. Make sure God hears it loud and clear in order that he knows that we're ready for the blessings and only the good things now, because unfortunately, we just had to face all these negative and bad things that happen. And that, of course, is one of the powerful stories of the Tochacha. And another idea, looking more on the bright side of the Tochacha, is that the Tochacha, the curses, are not necessarily something that's supposed to, make us tremble and just scared and okay, we need to serve God this way because look what's going to happen. But rather, the Tochacha, almost like you can look like a parent educating a child, where, listen, there's consequences for our action. It's not like, okay, I'll do this mitzvah, I'll do that mitzvah, I'll do the ones that I choose, which ones are good for me, and then I'm good to go. No, being a Jew, we have to connect to Hashem in the fullest way that we're able to. We need to do our best to do every single mitzvah. And Hashem basically tells us, there's consequences for our actions that we do. Just like a parent says that you got to go through sometimes some painful moments. You're going to have to go through some things in life. And if you make these mistakes, there's going to be consequences. But a person should not view the consequences as a full-on punishment and being wrong, but rather realize that sometimes the consequences that we face in life, sometimes the troubles and the hardships that we face are actually hidden blessings. And many times people go through business, and people go through life, and they learn things the hard way. But yet they'll say that the things that they learned the hard way sometimes were the best education that they ever got. Sometimes the challenges that they faced, the tochachos, so to speak, the curses that they had, were actually the biggest blessings eventually in their life. And therefore, the tochacha doesn't necessarily need to be looked at just like a scary warning. But yes, we all will face a tochacha perhaps in our life. But you know what happens after we face the tochacha? The tochacha ends off. It says that Hashem was going to remember Abraham and remember Jacob and Yaakov, and he's going to make sure that we're promised good things. In fact, after the Torah portion of Parshat Kitavo, before Rosh Hashanah, which is the other Torah portion of the Tochacha, there's also the next Torah portion is V'atem Netzavim Hayom. After the curses and after everything terrible happened, Atem Netzavim Hayom, you're all going to stand together today, and you're going to all be here together. You're going to be standing strong after all the challenges that we go through in life. And that's the message also of the latter Kochacha and Parshas Kisavo that we're going to be reading. And of course, this is it's an important thing to remember. I once heard from Rabbi Tversky, he was giving an analogy for the Tochacha, for the curses that we read. And he said that it's funny what happens in life. He says a parent takes their child to get shots, right? I took my kid the other day to get shots at the doctor's office. And the children, they're not stupid. They know what's about to happen. There's a little board with 6, 7, 8, today 9, 10, 12, a lot of shots lined up, and they're ready to give out shots to the child. And they go quickly, and they do a good job. The kid knows what's coming, especially after the first one. So what happens? He tries to fight his way out. He tries to hide whatever he's going to do in the doctor's office not to get these shots because it's painful. So what does the parent have to do? What does the mother do? The mother has to hold the child down. And it's not a pretty sight normally, a young child, 2 years old, 3 years old, they're pushing, and the mother physically holds the child down in order to get the shots. What happens when the doctor finishes? The child buries his head in his mother's arms and starts crying and wants the mother to hold them. And of course, the mother holds the baby, gives him a hug, and holds the child. The question is, the child, why is he turning back to his mother? His mother's the enemy. She's the one that held the baby down, and now you're running back to your mother. But of course, you know that this is your mother. This is the mother that loves the child. Even though, yes, you had to go through the painful moments. There's still, even though there were these challenges and these painful moments, the mother is the one that is watching you and was there and was guiding you throughout them all. And the part of the message of the tochacha, of the curses, is that even though, yes, that maybe at times we have to go through the tochacha, Hashem is there with us throughout the way. And we should never think that God is not with us. Of course, it's one of these big fundamental questions, where was God? And there's all kinds of answers. People say, where was God throughout the challenges? There's many discussions about, where Hashem was. I once heard someone say that how do you question God after the Holocaust? You should question human beings. Where was mankind? Where were the people? Or like someone said, you want me to not believe in God after the Holocaust? You want me to believe in man, the ones that actually did the physical things, killing many people? And even though we go through challenges, and I'm not going to sit and answer all the questions of why we have challenges, because I don't think there is an answer for any challenges and hardships that we go through. Sometimes God tells us the reason, and we're fortunate and we understand them, but many times we don't. And that's the idea of this world and the challenges that we go through. But never to think for a moment that Hashem abandons us. Never to think that Hashem left for a little bit and then he comes back. Like I like to share was a poem I once read. There's a poem I once read about a person at the end of his life. He comes to the Olam Haba, he comes to the world to come, and he sees his life being played in front of him. And it's like projected on a big screen, and he sees all the moments of his life. And the screen is projected along a beach with sand. And as he's watching his life, he sees in the sand there's two sets of footprints. And the two sets of footprints, he understands were his and God's walking along the beach as he watched all the moments of his life unfold. When suddenly he notices, as he's turning 18 years old and his life unfolding, he goes through a very difficult and challenging moment of his life. And things are very, very tough. And all of a sudden he's watching these difficult moments that he went through and the challenges that he had. And he looks at the footprints and he sees one set of footprints disappears. He sees God's footprints. God left. I went through a challenge. And then he was 20, things started to settle down and things were good once again. And all of a sudden the footprints came back. And his life continues. And every single time he saw a challenge in his midlife, in his mid-30s, all of a sudden the footprints of God disappears. And only his are there all by himself. And then things get smooth and better. And God's footprints come back. And he's watching his entire life unfold in front of him. And this is what he sees happening. And he finishes watching his life, ready to receive his judgment. And he turns to God and he says, God, I have one problem with this. Every single time I went through a difficulty, there's only one set of footprints. Why did you leave me? And Hashem says, my dear child, I want you to know that those footprints were mine. And the footprints in the sand were mine, and the ones that left were you, because I picked you up and I was holding you and carrying you through those difficult moments. And the message, of course, is that even as we read the Tochacha, even as we read the moments that seem to be very sad, hard, and painful, Hashem is there with us. And we should never think that God abandons us during the difficulties. There was a story of the Alta Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi. And the Alta Rebbe had a synagogue where he would read the Torah every single year. And his son, the Mittler Rebbe, was a young boy. And one year his father, the Alta Rebbe, was out of town. And the Mittler Rebbe, his son, was sitting in the synagogue when it was Parshat Kitavo. It was right before Rosh Hashanah. And they were reading the curses. And the Mittler Rebbe was 11 years old at the time. And he hears the curses and he begins to get sick. He became ill from listening to the Torah reading. And he was crying and in a lot of pain. And they asked him, what's going on? And he says, to hear the curses that are going to befall the Jewish people, it was very painful to listen to. I can't listen to them. It made him physically sick. In fact, it says that year, Yom Kippur, they were scared that he wasn't going to be able to fast because he was so sick from hearing the curses. But they asked him, didn't you hear the curses last year and the year before? Why all of a sudden are you hearing the curses and you're getting all sick from hearing them? And he said that when my father, the Alta Rebbe, reads the curses, I don't hear curses. I only hear the blessings. And sometimes in the curses itself, there's blessings. When you get to the deeper layer of things, you realize that the curses actually all have blessings within them. And there's actually a story about these blessings that are, sometimes expressed through a negative language. And it says that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Elazar, they went to receive a blessing. Those are the ones that we just celebrated. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Elazar are the ones that were in the cave, by the way. But it says that they went to receive a blessing from different sages. And the sages gave them a blessing, but it seemed to be a bunch of curses. And they said, may it be God's will that you will not sow and you will not reap. And that what you bring in will not go out, and what you take out will not come in. And that your house will be desolate and your temporary lodgings inhabited. And that your table will be disturbed, and that you'll not see a new year. This was the blessing, so to speak, that they got when they went to some sages to receive the blessing. And when Rabbi Lazar, the son of Shimon, came home, and he said to his father, what is going on? And he said, these are blessings. And he asked him, how is this a blessing? He said, you will not sow and reap. That means that you're going to have children, and they will not die. And they will be doing the sowing and the reaping for you. You're going to have children one day who are going to do this work, and you're never going to have to work in the field again. He said, what you bring in will not go out. What does that mean? That you're going to bring home daughters-in-law, and your sons are not going to die because they're not going to have to leave because they passed away and they need to find a new spouse. And what you take out is not going to come in. Means that you're going to give your daughters into marriage, and their husbands are not going to die either. And your daughters will not need to come back home because they have a house to live in. And he says that your house is going to be desolate and your temporary lodging inhabited. He says, what does this mean? It means that you're going to really understand the purpose of this physical world, that this physical world is a temporary lodging, and that the next world is going to be your real home. You're going to do what you're supposed to fulfill in this physical world. You're going to be able to focus on this world. And you're going to know that the real world is going to be Olam Haba that you have. There was once a story of a very wealthy man who was in the marketplace with a suitcase, and he bumped into Reb Zusha from Anapoli, I believe it was. And he said, I need a place to stay. And Reb Zusha sees the wealthy man, and he says, oh, you could stay by me. Come to my house. I have a mansion. I have beautiful, beautiful rooms. I have the most gorgeous, gorgeous home. Why don't you come with me and stay over? And the wealthy man was very excited to hear someone similar. He says, oh, me too. I also have everything. And a big mansion, a big home with the most luxurious things. He says, good. He comes over, and all of a sudden, Rabbi Zusha opens the door to a tiny little shack, a tiny little home. And he says, well, what's going on? Where's your mansion? And he turns to the man, the wealthy man. He says, where's your mansion? He says, I'm just passing through. I'm traveling. And Rabbi Zusha says, me too. I'm also just traveling. This is not, my mansion is in the world to come. That's where my real home. This is a temporary dwelling. And then he continued, and he said that the table that you have is going to be disturbed. He says that means that you're going to have children. You're going to have grandchildren. They're going to disturb the table. There's going to be noise. There's going to be life. And you will not see a new year represents the idea that your spouse won't die, and you'll have to take a new one because that's considered like a new year. And the idea is that with every curse in life, every challenge in life, there's always some kind of blessing. There's always some kind of blessing connected to it. It says by our matriarch Rachel, Rachel Imenu, it says that she was upset that she couldn't have any children, and she cried out that she wanted to have children. And it says that the reason she wanted to have children is in order to say that Rashi brings down that to blame the mess, basically who ate the figs and who made the mess. It should be who broke the vase. I think the two examples are, and she would be able to blame it on her children. And right away the commentators say, what? That's why you want to have children? You want to have children in order that you can blame all your challenges, all your problems, everything on your kids, right? I guess it kind of makes sense. Rachel knew maybe her mother-in-law was coming to visit, and she would see the house is a mess, and she would want to say, oh, it's the kids, it's your grandchildren that made the mess. But she didn't have grandchildren, so she said, I need to have children to blame the mess on. The question is, what's going on over here? And the answer, of course, is with every challenge in life that we have, if we look deep enough, we see that this challenge is really connected to a blessing. You walk into your house and you have a leak in the roof. Thank God you have a home. Thank God you own a house that you now need to worry about the leak and not the owner of the home. You have almost every challenge that a person has in life. If they look close enough, they can find that there's a blessing within the challenges that we have to go through. And of course, it's difficult, and every challenge is different. And but if we focus closely on this, we'll be able to see that we have a lot of blessings in life. And maybe sometimes, I just heard a story recently. I shared it recently. It was a story about Rabbi Manis Friedman, and he was once going to Argentina. And I was telling the story to the students I teach in 8th grade, because we were talking about the blessings and the challenges that Hashem gives us, and how we don't have a choice. Sometimes Hashem gives us a challenge, but sometimes there's a blessing connected to it. A similar topic to what we're discussing now, and sometimes it's difficult still. And this story came to mind that Rabbi Manis Friedman was in flew to Buenos Aires, to Argentina, to speak to a community there. And he says he hated flying on the airplane. And he's flying on the airplane, and his kid's making noise, and he was in a middle seat, and he said it was the worst flight ever. And he lands, and the rabbi picks him up, supposed to bring him to his hotel, and he gets into the car, and he says, "Oh, Rabbi Friedman, I'm so glad you're here. There's a woman in our community who's been in depression for the last 6 months. She's depressed. And she no one could talk to her. She doesn't want to talk to anybody. She's not coming out of her depression, but we told her that you're coming, and she said that she'll speak to you. So we're going to her house, and you're going to go and speak to her." And Rabbi Friedman says, "Excuse me?" He didn't say anything, but he was thinking, chutzpah. You're just going to bring me to this? You didn't even ask me. What's going on over here? You didn't ask me to bring me to this woman's home, and I just got off the airplane. At least let me check in first and then see if I want to go. Anyways, they bring him to the house of this woman, and he says that he sees that this woman is sitting there, and to quote him, he says that this woman looks like she was dead and no one told her. She had no life in her. And he starts to ask her what's going on, and she said that she had a child of 19 years old who died in a tragic accident. And he says, "Tell me about this child." And she starts to describe how incredible her son was, and how her son was the best and nicest and smartest and most wonderful 19-year-old. And Rabbi Manis looks at her and says, what if Hashem told you before the baby was born that I'm going to entrust you and give you a gift for 19 years to watch over this child? And there would be no shock factor, no wow factor, because you only have this child for 19 years. The blessing, so to speak. And the woman looks at Rabbi Manis and says, I would have said no. I would have said no. And Rabbi Manis looks at her and says, well, it's a good thing he didn't ask you. And all of a sudden, the woman started to cry, and he describes as she was crying, the life started coming back into her and brought this woman back to life. And then he said he was in the car, and he started to think to himself, he said, sometimes we have blessings in our life, and it comes with challenges, and it's a good thing Hashem doesn't ask us. And he says, I was sitting in the car on the way there. I'm like, they didn't even ask me. They didn't even ask me to go, if I would go and speak to this. And he said, it's a good thing they didn't ask, because I would have said no, and then I would have missed this moment to help another individual. And I think that sometimes the message of the Tochacha is, yes, there's blessings intertwined and connected to each one of them. It's interesting that Reb Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe, he lived in a time after the destruction of the first temple, and he's the one who set up, when we read all the Torah portions, and he set up, and he, by the way, he was, of course, a very instrumental person to Judaism and everything. He was from the Anshe Knesset Gedola. He passed on everything that we know of the Torah. He sat on the top of the Sanhedrin, right? One of the famous people that worked in the Sanhedrin at the time was Mordechai. The Ezra the scribe, kept Judaism alive, and he set up that the Tochachot, these two Torah portions, this week Bechukotai and Kitavo for Rosh Hashanah, should be at these two times. Shavuos is the day, which in a couple of weeks we read is Shavuot, but it's always right before, a week before Shavuot, we read this Torah portion, because Shavuos is the time that we're about to renew our contract and our agreement with God. It's the time that we're going to get more blessings in our life. And we need to, make sure that we know how to act in this proper way. And the same thing before Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Judgment, Hashem says, just remember how you're supposed to act. And that's why these two Torah portions are read before these two holidays, to make sure that we're on the right path. But something that's interesting is that it says that when that if you look deeper into the curses on a basic level, it says that also they hint to different spiritual things and services to Hashem. And one of the verses of one of the curses that are brought down is it says that 10 women will bake bread in one oven, right? And they will not be satiated. They will not be sustained by it. It won't be good enough, right? That's a pretty bad curse. Imagine 10 women have to bake bread in one oven. Obviously, that means the poverty level will be so low, and everybody has to share an oven, and there's going to be so little food that you're not even going to be full from the bread that you bake. Chassidus is, by the way, like the inner dimensions of the Torah, bringing out the understanding of the Torah in a way that has never been understood before. It says Chassidus is the taste of Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, it says that we're going to understand everything differently. We're going to understand everything in a much deeper way. In fact, it says that when Mashiach comes, some of the scriptures that we read are actually not going to be read anymore. Including that, some say the Psalms of David, some say that different stories that had to do with, hardships of the Jewish people, it says they won't be necessary. We don't need to learn them or read them after Mashiach comes, because everything's going to be understood. But it says the 5 books of Moses is going to be read, including the curses. And the question is, why do we need to read after Mashiach comes about the curses? And he explains because the curses actually have a much deeper understanding. And Chassidus kind of gives us this outlook that we could look into this deeper dimension of the curses to understand the ideas behind them. And this verse of the 10 women baking in one oven, he explains that in order to bake bread, in order for it to be sustainable, in order to that you could have sustenance from it, in order that you could eat it, you have to put it in a very big fire. So the bread needs to have this fire. What is this idea of the bread? The bread is the understanding of God. And the fire is the passion, the burning passion that we have to find within ourselves to really understand godliness. And the 10 women represents the 10 faculties of the soul. We know that a person has 10 emotions. And the person needs to take this fire and take this bread and put it into the fire to be alive and burning passionately about godliness, understanding godliness, with his entire 10 faculties of his soul, his chachma, bina, das, chesed, gevurah, tiferet, netzach, hod, yisod, malchut, the 10 parts of the soul, which we're actually in the middle of going through, making them better during these days of Sfirot HaOmer. And the idea that he won't be satiated is that he'll always have this excitement. The satiation will never run out. He'll never be satisfied, say, oh, I did it, I learned it, I got it, I get God. But we'll always have this burning passion and connection to God. And this is what Chassidus explains. And this could also and will be understood when Mashiach comes about every single one of the curses, how there's a deeper message of how we have to live our lives in a more spiritual way. After the curses, the Torah has a few more laws, and this concludes the entire book of Leviticus. And the next set of laws are actually fascinating laws called Erchin. And that is that what if a person wants to dedicate and give over his life to the to God, and he says, I give myself over to Hashem. I want to be holy, Kodesh. I am Kedushin. I'm from now on sanctified to God. I am God. So what happens if a person wants to give himself over to Hashem? So it says that the person doesn't give his physical self, but he gives money, his monetary value. Now, the monetary value that he gives out is not based on his, it's not based on his looks. It's not based on his talents, but rather based on his age, that every age and gender as well will bring out a different value of how much he is worth. And starting at 50 silver coins, going down to a child being 5 silver coins. And the person could that way dedicate themselves to the temple, and also animals. And this is and also items, by the way. If a person says, I don't know, that this should be kodesh, this should be holy, this should be sanctified to the temple, he would then donate it and give it to the temple. And there's a whole evaluation over there. By the way, there's an interesting commentary that says, what is the connection to the curses that we read and this evaluate and then erchin, where a person donates himself to the temple? Why does one come right after the other? There has to be some kind of a connection to it. And there's different opinions, but one that I heard that's brought down in in the number, the number game is that it says that the value, if you add up all the numbers of how much a person is worth when they give themselves over to the Beit HaMikdash, is the amount of curses that are actually listed in the Torah portion. So, for example, he said, it's by the way, the Baal HaTurim is the commentary who brings down, if you're a numbers person, you like numbers, the Baal HaTurim is the one that brings them all down. And he says that the numbers would be 50 shekels, 30 shekels, 20 shekels, 10 shekels, 5 shekels, 3 shekels, 15 shekels, and 10 shekels for different ages and gender groups. Basically would be the value. If you add all those numbers together, it's 143 shekels. And the Baal HaTurim brings down, and he says that the number 143 equals the 45 curses in this week's Torah portion, and the 98 curses in the Torah portion of Kisavo in Deuteronomy that we're going to read before Rosh Hashanah. And he basically says that what is the antidote for the curses? It's the mitzvah to do erchin. It's the mitzvah of charity. It's the mitzvah of giving yourself over to the temple in that kind of way. So if you're a number person, it's an interesting and nice lesson. By the way, a lot of things in general are connected, as sins are connected to tzedakah. So if people do things, it's brought down that you should give tzedakah afterwards. And the tzedakah kind of makes up for any punishment that a person does. It used to be people would fast, by the way. If a person did something wrong, they would fast a certain amount of fast for a handful of days. It says today we're a little bit weaker. And therefore, a person should give tzedakah instead of fasting. Another idea, though, that's also brought down about this erech and why it's after is the idea of understanding one's identity. And that is that the identity of the Jewish person, even after the curses, is that, no, I have my identity. And the Torah tells us that what's special about the Jew? Sometimes the Jewish people, we've gone through terrible, terrible times. But what happens after the moments that we go through, the terrible moments, the hard moments, the breaking moments, the sad moments? It doesn't shut us down as a nation. And if you look into the Holocaust, after the darkest hour for the Jewish people, the survivors went to go and make Israel. Not only that, there's the Holocaust survivors, I look at the real biggest heroes are the ones that gave up their lives to make Israel. They went straight to form the Haganah. I met a person in Starbucks in Miami years ago. It was a very exciting story. His name was Joe Tenenbaum. He was from Toronto, and he had a home in Bell Harbor. And he would come in the winter. And I remember one day I was learning at Starbucks with someone. We were studying Torah. And it was a Friday morning. I was tired, and I yawned in the middle of learning Torah. And this older man, I didn't know he was a Holocaust survivor. He turns around and he like gives me this look, like angry at me. But I mind my own business. I continued. 5 minutes passed and I yawned the second time. And now this older gentleman couldn't handle it. Second time I'm yawning, he stood up and walked over to my table. And he starts telling me in Yiddish, how do you yawn while learning Torah? You're sitting here learning Torah and you're yawning. How do you do that? How do you yawn? And I love a personality like that. And I'm like, this guy came over to tell me why am I yawning. And I ended up sitting there talking to him for about 2.5 hours. He is actually an author of a book called Legacy and Redemption. You can look him up. His story is unbelievable. And we actually became close friends. We sat after that many, many times. The truth is, this was over 8 years ago. I tried getting in touch with him a few times, but I haven't heard anything back. So I should look into that. If anybody knows him, let me know how he's doing. But he told me that when he was after the Holocaust, so he grew up in a Hasidic home. He told me how he knows a bunch of Torah and learned a lot of everything. Yeah, that's it. That's his book. That's him, Legacy and Redemption. I have a signed copy from him as well. But he told me that after the Holocaust, he's like, I didn't have any family, nothing. So they asked me, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Israel. I said, that's impossible. You're in Palestine. He's like, I'm from Palestine. He said, that's impossible. You can't be from Palestine. He says, no, I am. So they said, how's that possible? And he said he made up a whole story. Why? Because he didn't want to go anywhere other than Israel. He said after the Shoah, and this man went through, I think, 4 concentration camps, beaten and almost killed multiple times. He wanted to go straight to Israel. He went straight to Israel and he signed up for the Haganah to fight for the state of Israel. But this is the resilience of the Jewish people. And that's why the Torah tells us the laws of Erchin, to tell us our value. A person has value. And even after the Tochacha, after the moments of curses, a person needs to turn to the next Torah, the next verses, speaking about the value that we have. And a Jew's value is that no matter what we go through, the resilience of a Jew is that we still have our value. We still have who we are. We still could dedicate ourselves to God. And we could still say we're going to stand strong no matter what happens. Many people, they see and go through hardships and they're done. They're finished. But the Jewish nation, no matter what we've been through, we always stand strong and remember Erchin. Erchin is our value, how much we're worth, and that we won't let it get us down. So even after we face the curses, after we face the challenges, we know that we still have a value and we won't let it completely shut us down, but rather stand up strong and rebuild even after we face these difficult moments and challenges in our lives. And the Erchin are the laws. I see someone's asking a question. By the way, if anybody has any questions, comments, anything, please feel free. Those are the laws right after the story over here of the curses. It says it's called the valuation of how much a person is worth that wants to consecrate himself to the temple. And you can look through it in the Chumash. It says if a person basically says, I want to be sanctified and consecrated to the temple, so it says that he would give a certain value of how much he's worth. And the idea is showing how much a person's really worth, that we have worth a lot. Even after the curses, we know that we still have a great value and we could always rebuild. That was the message, Tamar. I hope that answered your question. Okay, I want to wish everybody a wonderful day. We have a delicious lunch and learn tomorrow. We have Shavuos around the corner. This Shabbat, Friday night dinner, we have a very, very important and special Memorial Day Shabbat dinner. And we have incredible speakers that will be speaking at this at the dinner. We have Brian Mast is going to be, Congressman Brian Mast is going to be speaking at the dinner, and he will address us. He's, of course, a veteran, as well as we have a Franklin Simon, which is he was a liberator of Mauthausen, a Jewish guy. He's been to shul, and he's a different, an amazing kind of guy, wonderful, very humble, but a great person with incredible stories at PFC. They both have multiple Purple Hearts that they received, and I mean his story is incredible. So make sure Friday night you join us for Shabbat dinner here at the synagogue. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Yom Tov and Lehitraot. We'll see you soon.